Drawing your own floral designs for leather tooling like this can be one of the most intimidating aspects of the craft, in my opinion. It's something that I still struggle with to this day, but in this video I'm going to be sharing with you 3 basic tips slash ideas that have helped me get to where I am and will hopefully help you with your confidence in drawing going forward. I've been very hesitant to create this video or any other videos around drawing because, like I mentioned a second ago, it is something that I still struggle with to this day, and I've spent many years working at this. I am a person that would not consider myself artistic. I didn't grow up drawing or doodling. I never attempted to draw until I got into leatherwork. And so what I am able to produce now has just come from me studying, learning, practicing, failing, and just being willing to suck until I can, again, just gain that confidence to create the work that I do now. So for any of you guys out there that are limiting yourself, saying, well, I can't draw, well, I can't do this and I can't do that, you got to be willing to work at it. Now, I know there are going to be some people out there who actually can't. You don't have the capability, but if you have the capabilities to watch this video, understand what I'm saying, and hold a pencil and do leather tooling, then you have the ability to draw. You just have to work at it and be willing to learn and study and just be willing to suck at it, to be completely honest with you, because I'll put pictures up of some of my early drawings. They were terrible. I didn't understand it. I didn't have any clue how to go about it. And so hopefully with the things I share with you in this video, they will give you a little bit better understanding and I guess a little bit of guidance to help you get going, especially if you're a beginner, because this is very intimidating. When it comes to these traditional Western floral designs, there's a lot of ideas and styles around the topic, whether you're talking about Sheridan style, Porter, Northeast Texas. I'm not going to dive off into all of that in this video. We may talk about that in the future, but it's really easy to get confusing if you start just overwhelming yourself with all these ideas and different concepts. So I'm going to try to keep it as basic as I can. There are going to be still some basic ideas that I may not cover in this video. I'm mainly just going to focus on what has helped me gain the confidence to not necessarily draw or style myself in any particular category, but to just help me gain a better understanding around the concept of it and give me the confidence to sit down and try to create designs that actually look good when you tool them out in leather. So in this video, I'm going to be really just focusing on a belt pattern, because a lot of the ideas we're going to talk about or the tips will translate across all tooling, whether you're talking about belts, guitar straps, big portfolios, or binders like I just showed you. A lot of the concepts will translate across the board, but a belt is, there's plenty of room to practice and learn and study different designs, but it also it kind of limits you and forces you to put those designs to work and see what you can fit in these areas. And so we're going to be focusing on belt patterns today because belts are a simple project that a lot of you seem to be interested in. So I'll quit rambling. Let's get to the table and start talking about this. I may get long-winded in this video, so I do apologize. It's easy for me to dive off down all these different rabbit holes when I start talking about specific subjects, so just be aware of that, and I do apologize. I'm going to try to throw as much information, as much beneficial information as I can at you guys without hopefully being too confusing. So before we start actually drawing out the belt pattern, like I said we will do, I want to start talking about those tips or ideas. So tip number 1, which is something that has helped me tremendously, is, and it's something very simple that you can do, is just study different forms of floral work. Regardless of the art form you're studying, look at floral layouts and study the elements that make up those layouts. So what I'm talking about is, regardless of, let's talk about leatherwork in general, regardless of the style, the pattern size, or how it's laid out, when you break those designs down, all it is really is going to be your primary structures, which that isn't even the case always, but generally going to be your primary structures like your leaves, your flowers, your feathers, and then the space around it's just going to be filled up with all of these basic elements. So the more elements you know and learn and practice drawing and get used to implementing, then it's like adding a tool to your tool belt or your tool roll. It's going to give you a better awareness of, okay, I can add this element here, and this type of element can fill up this much space, and then I can flow this here and connect it like this. And so I hope that isn't too confusing, but study the different types of elements and also the variations of those elements. So even if you just look here at a basic scroll, there's a lot of different ways you can adjust the size or the variation of that scroll. And then even just a simple sticker,
we'll take a sticker right here, about the most basic vine work element you can have. You can have a sticker like that laid out, or if you have a border on your project, you can have the sticker tip hiding behind that border. You can have the sticker laying over that border. You can have the stickers that are almost connecting like that, laying on top of each other. And so just sit down with pencil and paper and practice drawing out what you learn when you study. And again, regardless of the art form that you are studying, there's so many different elements that make up floral work, and there's so many ways to implement them. And the different regional styles that I kind of hinted at all have different variations of those elements. But again, the more you practice them and the more you learn them, the better understanding you'll have when you go to sit down and lay out a design of where you can fit what and how you can make it look like it's supposed to be there and flowing properly to then slowly create a full layout. So once again, tip number one is, as you're studying different forms of floral layouts, what you might just be looking at another maker's project that they created, or something in a museum or something in a workbook, study the elements that make up those big patterns and try to break those elements down as best as you can, and then practice drawing them. And if you need drawing aids, then there's plenty of things that you can get at craft stores, like these circle diagrams or these little flowy things that can help you, just basic layouts of scrolls and stuff like that. If you need to use that, by all means, go ahead. And then as you start to expand your knowledge around the different elements, start just trying to do some basic layouts of those elements, figure out how they need to connect and how you can fill up certain spaces with them. Because when you break down a big fancy floral design, all it is all of these elements just filling up that space. So try to equip yourself with these as best as you can. So the next thing I want to talk about is more or less an idea rather than a tip. And it kind of helps me conceptualize these designs and break them down, because if you look at something that's already been finished like this, it can be kind of overwhelming and kind of confusing if you're not used to looking at this or creating something like this. And so pretty much anybody that you hear talks about laying these types of designs out, you're going to hear them say flow. You want to have flow and create good flowing motion. And I always understood that, like, okay, I know you want to create flow and have all of these swirly, coolly looking designs, but how do you go about doing that? Like, where do you even start? And there are different ways to plan for that, depending on the size of the project, the layout, the shape, and all of that stuff, which I'll talk about later or another time. But a saying that kind of helps me break that statement down a little bit easier is grow with flow. Grow with flow. So bear with me for a second. I'm going to go a little bit off topic. If you think of a tree out in nature and you look at that tree, it's fully bloomed out, it's got beautiful leaves on it. It looks like a pretty complex organism. But as you take a closer look and you start breaking it down element by element, you'll notice that, okay, all of these big areas right here are just made up of these leaves. And then these leaves connect back to a little twig, and then that twig is connected to a bigger branch, and then that branch goes back and connects to the main body or the trunk of the tree. And so everything is connected and growing off of each other, which then comes together to create this big complex organism. I hope that isn't too confusing or too out there, but that's how I like to break it down and think of these floral layouts as well, as everything is growing. And as it grows, it creates the flow. As you start adding these elements in and connecting them back to each other, that's where the flow is going to come from. And so if you look at my work, I never really want to have anything look as if it doesn't belong. I always try to make sure that when I add something in, if I'm adding an element and connecting it, I want to make sure that it looks as if it grew out of that structure and it belongs there. If you will trace all of these back, you'll notice that all of these elements funnel back down into each other as if they're peeling off or growing off of each other. I never really put anything that's just kind of sticking out of something just very odd and random, because that would catch your eye and it would kind of throw your eye off from the flow and would kind of make you think, like, what in the world? Because if you look at a tree, like if you were to look at a tree like this and you see the main trunk right here, kind of like I have it drew out, and then there's just something sticking out from the back, it kind of makes you wonder, like, okay, how is that there? Rather than if you see it just flowing into and connecting to that tree, it looks as if it belongs. And so That's how I like to lay these floral designs out. So once you plan and get your main motion or your main direction that you're going to kind of portray that growth, you want to make sure that everything continues to grow off of that main structure in the same direction and kind of connects back how it belongs. I hope that makes sense. So grow with flow. That's just kind of what helps me understand it, and I hope that isn't too out there for some of you. So we're at the point in this video where we're about to actually start drawing out this belt pattern, and I want to give the third and final tip of this video, and it's going to be primarily focused towards all of you who are either beginners or just struggling to get going drawing your own patterns, and that is going to be keep it simple. You do not have to draw these crazy outlandish designs to make something look good, because in my opinion, almost everything that you tool in leather looks pretty cool. If you think about it, it's art at the end of the day, and it looks really cool because you created something from nothing. But if you're struggling to wrap your head around drawing these designs, then just start off with some of the most basic designs that you can come up with. And it doesn't have to be perfect. Don't get picky about it. Just draw. That's what it comes down to, is just drawing, building that muscle memory, training your eye for what it likes, and then growing from that over time, because it doesn't happen overnight. There's people that have been doing this for 20, 30, 40 years that are still learning and still growing at this craft. So it's a never-ending process of learning, growing, trial and error. So just keep that in mind. But if you're struggling with it, then let's just keep it simple. So as we start off with these, I'm going to draw a couple different belt patterns. And like I mentioned earlier, there are a few ways to plan for your designs, plan for how you want your layouts to grow and how you're going to portray that growth. But I'm just going to run you through my process when it comes to laying out these belt patterns. One of the very first things that I like to do is I like to take my wing dividers, and on my belts, I'm normally going to come in around 1/8 of an inch from the side, and that's where I'm going to sew the belt. That's where I'm going to run my stitch line. So one thing that I like to do is the very first step is to take my compass, set that at that 1/8 of an inch mark, and then I like to scribe a little faint line that's going to mark where my stitches will go, because I may or may not have a hard border, kind of like this right here on the belt, which will be in usually roughly 1/4 of an inch, so another 1/8 of an inch in from this line. But just like you can see here, sometimes I may run my designs over that border, especially my leaves and my flowers, my bigger elements. I like to stretch those elements beyond that hard border, but I don't like to run anything into where my stitches will go, because when you go to sew up your project, if you are sewing your project, if you sew through a bevel line or sew through the middle of the tip of a leaf or something, it doesn't really look good, and sometimes those bevel lines can sink your thread, or your thread can sink in those bevel lines really weird. And so I like to mark my stitch line to make sure that that is my hard border that I'm not going to go beyond. And then this other border is optional. You can go about it however you want. That's really personal preference, but sometimes I stretch my designs beyond this extra border, but I don't like to stretch into that stitch line. So that is the very first thing I do on pretty much any project I'm going to be working on and tooling on. I like to mark my stitch line. So we're going to go ahead and do that really quick. You may or may not know this, but I normally just draw my designs directly onto the leather as well. I like to use an 8B pencil, 8B graphite pencil, and these blue pencils right here that I've been picking up from Michael's craft store, they have become my favorite. They hold a really good point and it lasts a long time, and the graphite transfers really well. Sorry. And so if you're not comfortable drawing directly onto the leather and you're wanting to draw on paper and then transfer it later, that's completely fine. But I like to draw directly onto the leather, so that's what we're going to be doing here. I don't necessarily follow any hard set rules when it comes to laying these designs out. I just kind of go about it however I'm feeling about going about it that day. But I will show you a few ways to plan for these designs to help you get going and speed up the process, because when I first started, it used to take me literally an entire day to sit down and try to scribble out a full belt design, and now it doesn't take near as long, but that's because I have worked at those basics and have a little bit better foundation to work off of now. So just don't get discouraged. Again, just be willing to work at it. One way that you'll see a lot of people kind of go about laying these designs out to start laying that flow out is they'll just add some guidelines. So you can kind of almost just lightly sketch a flowy guideline coming down at an angle like that, and then not connecting to that line, just slightly off of it, again almost as if it's growing and peeling off of that, and then slowly start to sketch another flowing guideline coming down. And the steepness of that is completely up to you. You don't want to get too high of a line and too low of a line. Again, just find that good middle ground that you're going to create some good flow with. And this is a simple way to start to kind of train your eye about how you want these designs to lay out and flow. And I'll go ahead and make this belt just kind of a whirlwind scroll work type belt pattern, just because when I am working on those types of designs, this is kind of how I go about doing it. I'll just lay these baselines out like that, and then once you kind of get these baselines out, from there we're going to take these basic elements that I said, and we're just going to start filling in space. So we're going to figure out where we want to start and just start filling in all of this space, and then again, as we fill in that space, we will start to develop that flow. I may just do a little time lapse of this because I'm still not that fast at drawing and I don't want to bore you to death. Before I continue on with this is another area where something like this can be very handy or beneficial to you. If you're not comfortable freehanding or sketching those lines out quite yet, then there are things like this out there available that can help you, that you can use to kind of lay down and trace or figure out different flow lines or flow structures that you want to create. So just be aware that there are things like this out there that can be beneficial to you if you need them. So I now have my wing divider set at 1/4 inch, which will be that hard border that I'm going to set a little bit further in from that stitch line. And I can now use this when I start laying out these guidelines and lightly scribe that in if I want to help me understand where that is, and to dictate if I want to stretch anything beyond that or make everything run directly into that, or just kind of help me plan further on. So once I get going, I can then start to lightly scribe another line in there. I don't usually scribe that near as deep because I may or may not follow that completely, so I'll do it a little bit lighter like that, and that'll just give me a good referencing point for where I'm going to start putting all these stickers and scrolls and things like that. So to keep it simple, I'm just going to grab my little sheet here with my elements on it to help directly give me an idea of how I want to start filling in this space. And I'm going to start right here on this line and then branch off of it and start filling in all of this space right here, and then filling in that space and kind of working my way backwards. And another thing really quick is when I'm drawing out my belt patterns, I always try to set the belt down left to right, with the tip of the belt being on the right side, as if it's going to wrap around the waist like that. That's just typically how I like to go about doing it. But looking at our sheet right here, we're going to try to figure out a simple element that we can use to fill in this space. And I always like to kind of fill this bigger space in right here with an acanthus type structure like this. So we're just going to come here, look at that border that we're going to reference, and then just kind of fill in some space. The thing about me is there's no really hard rules when it comes to like the background space that you want to leave open and stuff, but I don't like to have a lot of background in my designs. So you'll try to see, that's something that I'll keep in mind as I start filling in, is I don't like a lot of background, and I always try to keep my background spaces similar in size. You don't really want to have a ginormous hole of background and then all the rest of it just be these little tiny areas. So that's another thing to keep in mind when you're drawing, to keep everything looking good as if it is supposed to be like that, and nothing really stands out to throw your eye off away from what we're trying to attract the eye to, if that makes sense. And you can see when I'm drawing with my pencil, I don't really just push it down and draw hard like that. I always just kind of lightly sketch those designs to get a good general base to work off of, and then just slightly sketch in those lines to bring them back into this other line like that. We're not going to run into that line like that. We're going to try to bring it back down as close as we can to that, but keep it off of it and make it look like those were flowing almost out of the same area down here in the same direction, and it just, like a tree, grew off and peeled off of that right there. So now we have this area filled in, and if you want to just keep it simple, we can just keep adding little stickers. Let's do almost like an overlapping sticker, kind of like this. And you don't have to draw super small elements. That's another thing that I used to try to do. If you've watched any of my older videos, then you know that I try to draw to fit my tools. I want to draw designs that will help me create the best work with my tools as I can. So I try to match my designs with my tools, if that makes sense. And so I used to really like to try and draw small stuff, and now I'm more of a medium size element type person, because that really small stuff can still kind of throw me for a loop. So I try to keep it on the medium side, if that makes sense. So this little line I'm sketching right here, I'm just going to talk through this, will be the top part of a sticker, and it just is the top branch that flows back into this flowing sticker. And then here's going to be the main body that we're going to start bringing back, just slightly sketching and bringing back towards this other line, gradually getting closer to it the more we draw, and then just bringing that down. And as you can see, it starts to take shape, and that's like we're just filling in space, and you can see it starts to just kind of create that flow as you start to fill in that space. I'm kind of rambling and whatnot, so I'll try to speed it up for you guys. Again, we're just going to keep this pretty simple, mainly just sticker based. We can come down here and do this. There you go. Make it look as if everything's kind of coming out from that little area. And then go with my border. Boom. There's where everything is. And so if you take a look at this and break it down, it's just these simple elements flowing into each other, filling up that space, and then these areas right here are our background. And if you need to go through and make a little dot like that to help give you something to reference or remember when you're tooling this out that is your background, then by all means do that as well, because that's another way to help you identify, okay, I'm going to bevel this line like that because it needs to be pushed down towards the background. I'll talk about that in another video. Sorry, again, I can start rambling when I talk about things like that. And then if we come in here to start filling in this space, same thing, just we'll branch a sticker off right here. Well, let's do one of them connecting stickers. Boom. Flow it back down. Now you have this big long flowing thing right here. And what to do with this random line that just stops right here. Something that I like to do is make it appear as if it were to continue on through that border up behind it, and then kind of come out down here. So you can start that and try to find the angle that goes up into that and match it up on this side. And now it kind of gives the appearance as if this part of it is behind that border, and then it flows out right here, and then we'll create another sticker right here. And now we're just going to keep moving on down through here, filling in space. I went through that pretty quick, so it is a fairly crude drawing, so keep that in mind. But I hope that kind of helped show you or help you understand what I'm explaining a little bit more. Once you get those guidelines laid out, then we're just stickers, acanthus, and we're just filling in that space. And as you fill in that space, you can see everything is tapering and peeling off of each other, and as that grows off of each other and grows down that belt, it creates the flow. So I hope that helps, and I hope that makes a little bit of sense. So now I'm going to draw a belt pattern with flowers and maybe some leaves, and I'm going to show you another way that I like to go about it, and that is by starting out with laying my primary elements out before anything else. So I'm going to go through and put my flowers and leaves in the positions that I want them to go, and then all of that open space is where my vine work's going to go, and that open space that I leave myself is me planning and dictating the flow of which that vine work is going to grow and portray all of that flowing growth. And another tip or hack or whatever you want to call it is, if you struggle drawing your flowers out freehand directly on paper or a belt, I used to really struggle with drawing out flowers or leaves that I enjoyed the way that they look. Another thing that I would recommend doing is taking your little practice sheet like this and drawing an 1.5 inch guideline or an inch guideline for a belt, whatever you're working on, and then take some simple transfer paper like this. I'm a big fan of this transfer paper. Set it down over that element and trace it out. Well, you can trace it out with this 8B pencil onto that transfer paper, just like I have here. And then you can then figure out and draw a design that you actually like and are comfortable using and you think is going to look good when you tool it out. And then you have it, you can replicate it over and over with this. And I have certain leaves and flowers and designs that I might draw out and I really like how that looks and I want to remember it and replicate it on something going forward. And so I will transfer it onto this transfer paper and throw it in a drawer and save it for later and use it to study and practice with my own work at times. But once you get that on that transfer paper, you can go through and say, okay, I'm going to set my flower here. And then you can trace that out. If you use this method and you use an 8B pencil, then it transfers off of, the graphite transfers off of that transfer paper fairly well. And then the back side of that didn't have anything on it, so it transferred very lightly. But then you have a skeleton or a baseline to work off of, and if you need to alter that, you can then go through with the same 8B pencil and touch up the lines, make them bigger or smaller or flowing different if you want. But that can also speed up your drawing process by saving your patterns or saving your designs that you want to either replicate again or just use to practice and study on with your own work. So for time's sake on this video, I just went ahead and used this exact same flower and placed them throughout this, and I just placed them in a manner where this particular flower has a primary petal or a main petal that the stem of my vine work is going to flow into and connect, like that flower's blooming off of that vine work. And so they are strategically set up and placed where the stem will kind of dictate the flow, and it's going to come like this, and then this side's going to come down like this, and then this side will come back up again like that, which will make a little bit more sense as I start drawing it out. But as you can see, if you choose this route, then you can fill up a lot of space throughout a belt pretty quickly, and that can give you a little bit more confidence in and of itself, seeing a lot of that belt filled up and just
consciously knowing, okay, all I have to do is fill in this little space, and then I can move on and fill in this little space, and it breaks it down into those smaller increments and can help your mental when it comes to filling in these spaces, and help you focus on only tackling a little section at a time. So that's another reason why I like to choose this route at times. And just as I mentioned earlier, you can see that these petals stretch pretty close to the stitch line border, obviously well beyond where this hard border is going to be, but they don't bump into that stitch line. And so then I can go through in these little spaces and once again lightly scribe a hard border if I choose to use that or not. And that will help me decide where to flow all of my lines and connect, just like earlier. And so just as I said, this flower has the main petal right here, and this flower has the main petal right here. So if we pretend like the vine structure flew down into this petal, to keep that same flowing and growth motion, we're going to now bring another stem up into this petal. So almost like we did earlier, I'm just going to start sketching some guidelines, and this right here will be the stem. And when you're creating these, once again, we're going to bring it back towards that other line as close as we can and flowing down in that same direction without actually bumping into it or connecting. And then if we're just going to keep it simple, just start drawing some stickers, flowing them back down. And if you want to draw a sticker that actually shows the point and the full tip, you can do that. Just keep it simple and just build that foundation, build that muscle memory. And then just like that, we have a simple section filled up with a stem and some vine work. And then once you start building that foundation and getting comfortable with that, that's when you can start bending the rules or adding more elements. You can go back to your sheet and say, oh yeah, I know how to draw a scroll. I think a scroll would look really cool here. So as you come in here and start to add this piece of vine work, then you can say, okay, let me try to try something new and squeeze a scroll into this area. And then you can just keep branching off of that, trying new things. I'm drawing this very quick. This video is getting a little long, so I'm sorry. But I think this is what all you guys clicked on this for, is to actually watch this part. So, and then just like that, you have another section, and when you start to look at it, it kind of starts to take shape and flow. And then when you start looking down the entire length of the belt, everything just starts to flow and create that big complex structure. And then you can take it a step farther, however you want to say that. Start adding in some really cool stuff. And then just get better and better and better and try new things and learn different elements and learn different styles. And we'll start diving off into more stuff like that in the future. I hope this video was somewhat helpful to some of you. I know it was probably confusing because this stuff can just get confusing. That's just all there is to it. It can be hard to understand, so I completely understand that. But I promise you guys, if I can figure it out, then I have full faith in you that you can. It just takes a little bit of time and practice and courage to get out of your comfort zone and just do it, you know what I mean? So I hope that is helpful for you guys. I hope that, again, just gives you a little bit of confidence going forward with your drawing skills. And we'll catch you in the next one. Appreciate you guys, but till then, we'll see you.